For board members of regulatory organisations, those that come from the industries or the areas that are being regulated perform a very valuable function because they can provide a source of information about industry dynamics, about what's being seen or heard about the regulatory activity or the regulator themselves, and they can impart knowledge about contexts that the regulator may or may not have easily access to other than through regulated parties, which will always be framed in the way that people want it to be framed. So I think that's why, in fact, most regulator boards, either explicitly in the statutory framework that behind who is on the board, or more generally have industry people appointed to them. I think the other side of that is they have to be extraordinarily careful around the way they conduct themselves, particularly in terms of the possibility of regulatory capture, influencing, while they're on the board as a person from the regulatory industry, they need to really focus on wearing their governance hat and not advance their own interest from an industry perspective. And the board members that I've engaged with over a number of years, I think, understand that. I think for board members in regulatory organisations, depending on the nature of the organisation, so I'll refer to the Commerce Commission again, the board members there are active regulatory decision makers. In other Crown entities that are regulators, for example, the one that I'm in at the moment, the Civil Aviation Authority, the board has a more traditional governance role. They don't have direct levers around regulatory activity. So they don't make policy. They don't get to make regulatory decisions. That's the specific statutory responsibility of, in my case, the director. So I think that's challenging for those board. If they focus on the core governance activities, then it's about the capability of the organisation, the direction of the organisation. And I think for board members in those organisations to have the most effect, doing a bit of work to understand the business of regulation, and many of these board members across all of our Crown entities will come from industry that has been regulated, and they might take the view that they therefore understand regulation, and that's true in one sense, but they don't understand it from the perspective of the regulator, so learning a bit of that is useful. And then really just digging in around testing the direction of the organisation, trying to look for alignment between capability and systems and the strategy and the outcomes you're wanting, which is all classic kind of governance stuff. But if applied really well, I think it does make a real benefit to the organisation. The other thing, of course, is the board members are the link between ministers and agencies. So they have the opportunity to influence at the political level around things like resources and, if necessary, changes in policy frameworks. And they're also in a position in a regulatory organisation probably to tell the stories about the organisation, sometimes more than you might as the regulator yourself. The shift to being a board member, there's a lot of dimensions to it. So the sort of governance, kind of not getting into the detail, supporting the executive to get on with it and not interfering with it. There's the art of that when you move from being in the executive to the board. But the contribution you can make as a board member, if you've got kind of deep experience in the domain that we're talking about, is also, I think, a really important factor. And I guess if you've had broad experience in an area like regulation, then you can probably bring a lot to it. But recognising that it's got to be brought in a certain way.